G'day, Nigel here from Sax School. Welcome to Sax School Live episode 10. In today's session, we're going to be talking about why you should learn jazz standards even if you hate jazz. Plus, I'm going to give you some tips on breathing while you're playing saxophone, of course, and mouthpiece selection. But mostly, just going to be having some fun, hanging out, talking about saxophone for half an hour or so. So great to have you here and great to see that you can join us. And hey, don't forget, if you're watching on Facebook, you can really help us out by clicking the share button. Let your friends know about these Sax School Live sessions too, because that'll help us to get the message out about what we're doing here. But also, jump in and say hi. Let us know what your experience has been like with saxophone this week, what you've been up to, and any questions you might have. And if you're watching a replay on YouTube or on Facebook, same thing. Jump in and do those comments, because we do try and check as many of them as we can. So, lots to talk about today. I should introduce myself first if we've not met. So, I'm Nigel, and I run a thing called Sax School, which is a place where you can learn saxophone online. And in fact, we've got thousands of people who use Sax School. And as a member, you get access to a huge library of video lessons. There's 600 and something lessons in there now, all organized into categories and mini courses. So you can really quickly find what you want to learn. You just look for the subject area that you're interested in, whether that's beginner stuff or improvising or learning ska or blues or whatever. And all the lessons are very easy to follow with resources like worksheets and backing tracks and all that sort of stuff. And the really cool thing about being a Sax School member is you also get access to our private community, our Facebook group, a private Facebook group just for members. And we've got over 1,300 people in there now of our members who are also part of the community. It's such a great place to connect with other saxophone players. So you're never by yourself. You're always part of a big group of people where you can get support, encouragement, and also people are meeting up in there and actually recording stuff together, which is super cool. So that's Sax School, and you can try it out for 30 days over at McGillmusic.com. Now, let's get busy talking about some saxophone stuff. I've got Claire in the studio with me today. How you doing, Claire?
I'm good, thank you, Nigel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's just the two of us today because Chris is off doing something. I don't know, he's doing a gig or he's gallivanting around doing something. So probably having fun. That's what you do when you're Chris's age. So it's just the two of us, but that's okay. We're going to soldier on.
We'll make him watch back later.
Yeah, we'll make him watch it back and take notes. Yeah, that's good. And plus we can talk about him when he's not here. So what about you, Claire? How's your week been?
Good, thank you. Yeah.
Lots of stuff going on in the Facebook group?
Lots going on in the Facebook group, yeah. Do you want to just talk about that now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
What's going on? Tell me about it.
Well, something that I thought was really brilliant actually was we had a post from Beverly who she's just joined really recently Sax School actually and never learned to read music before, so this is really new to her. And she's passed an Open University module on music theory.
I saw that. Isn't that amazing? Actually, I like that story because Beverly was talking about how she started out with Sax School before she, was that right? Before she'd done any music learning. I think she
never
did
done some music learning before.
Yeah, so
brand new to her.
Yeah, really she did her first stuff on Sax School and then went on to do this Open University, which I think was like an 8-week course. If you're not from England, in England we've got this Open University thing. There's an equivalent thing in America, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
And Australia too, I suppose. So it's like a distance university learning thing. No, I was really chuffed by that. I thought it was fantastic, isn't it?
Really fantastic, yeah. And hopefully it's the start of something really great and continue to learn. That's really brilliant. Yeah,
I think the process of learning, is an ongoing one. And that's what keeps it fun and keeps it engaging is when you're going in and, exploring other avenues. So yeah, well done, Beverly. That's a great story, isn't it?
Yeah, really brilliant. And then we had Richard who posted a video of his beginner jazz band who were playing at a school fair and they played Blue Bossa, which they learned from one of the performance packs within Sax School from one of the mini courses, and he said how helpful the mini course had been. Yeah. But I thought his playing was great, really. The crowd seemed to be enjoying it, everybody standing around watching, so really great.
Yeah, I saw that too. I love that sort of stuff. Getting out and playing in front of other people, playing with other people, that's great, but playing in front of other people is also really, really good. It's such an important part of your development, I think, as a player, and pushes you into different areas. And also, actually, it can make you aware of stuff that you weren't aware of, help you build your confidence, brings out things in your playing that you might not have thought that you had to focus on. So all around, it always makes you a better player. Awesome. Hey, well, maybe we can talk about some more of that in a bit. That's brilliant. I forgot to do something. We do this quiz every week. I like doing the quiz because we've got so many clever people. You guys are a clever lot watching these Sax School Lives. So I've got a question for you this week. Rightio. So the question is, so there was a Billy Joel tune? 1977, Song of the Year or something, was it?
I think it won a Grammy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it won a Grammy.
But who was the sax player? You get the idea. That tune. Just the Way You Are. So who was it? Who was that sax player? It wasn't me. I'm not that old. So if you know who the sax player was for that solo, iconic solo in Just the Way You Are, let us know in the chat. We'll try and keep an eye on it. Claire, can you keep an eye on them?
I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm watching it now, yeah.
All right, awesome. And if you know it, put it in. But if you don't know it, stick around to the end because we'll let you know. Actually, it's a pretty cool story about that. So that's the quiz out of the way. I'll just mark it off on my list. Done. Cool. Now, hey, I was going to tell you what I've been up to this week as well, because it's been a bit of an interesting week here at Sax School HQ. Apart from having a cold, which I'm not going to moan about, no one likes to listen to that, but I did make some changes to this room. I had a new carpet put in, which at the time I thought was a brilliant idea. I'll put a new carpet in because it was a bit of a mess. And then when I actually got time to getting the carpet fitted, it's a nightmare because there's so much gear in here. I had to pull absolutely everything out of this room. So on Tuesday this room was completely empty, and then on Thursday I had to put it all back together again. So that was quite a job. But one thing that reminded me of, and I made a little video which I shared on the Facebook page this week about this whole process, is about acoustics. And we talked a little bit about this in the last session. So if you want to go and watch the replay for Sax School Live number 9, and it's on the McGill Music Vlog, and we were talking about acoustics and about how setting up your practice room so that it sounds better. So when this room was completely empty, it sounded dreadful in here. It was so echoey, and there was obviously no carpet because I was just about to get new carpet. So the sound's bouncing around everywhere, and it would make it an awful room to practice in. But once the carpet's in, because I've got some other sound stuff in here, heavy furnishing type things, it sounds lovely in here. It's really nice to practice. Although Claire was just in front of me playing my saxophone, she probably thinks it's too loud.
It was beautiful, beautiful.
Really. So anyway, so it's just a good reminder. You know, it's really important to think about where you're practicing and the acoustics of it. So if you're getting your carpet pulled out, don't practice in that room. That's my top tip. So that's what I've been busy, and I've also been busy filming some lessons for Sax School. We've got a new jazz performance pack coming out this week on I Got Rhythm, which is a classic jazz standard, and leads me into the topic that I wanted to talk about today, which was about why we should learn jazz standards. I'll get to that in a second, and I've got a little download for you this week too, and I'll tell you where you can get hold of that. But inside Sax School, if you're not a member, we've got these things called Jazz Performance Packs, which are really a brilliant learning tool. And what they are is a bundle of lessons where you can walk through in easy steps the whole process for a jazz standard, from learning the melody note by note on alto and tenor, through to understanding the harmony, which is a very important stage that a lot of people overlook, and then to getting some practical, actionable tips on how you can create really great solos over those tunes. So it's a whole sort of ecosystem of a jazz standard. And there's a bunch of these inside Sax School, like the one that I was making this last week, which is going to come out in the members area tomorrow, on Wednesday, is all about I Got Rhythm. So it teaches you everything about that. And once you work through that little bundle of lessons, it's about 6 videos, you will know that tune, and you'll have a backing track that you can use to practice along with or perform along with. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you need to know that tune, you've got everything you need to know. So I think they're a really great way to learn. It's something that I wish that I had when I was learning saxophone and jazz standards. So let's crack on with this teaching topic. Claire's looking at me like she wants to tell me something.
No, I'm just waiting for people to start answering the quiz.
All right.
I've had a couple of answers, but I'm waiting for all the others to come flooding in.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be coming in. Hey, also don't forget, if you've got a question, pop it in the chat, because we'd love to hear from you. I will try to get through as many as I can today. So if you've got a question about you're practicing, or maybe something that you're struggling with at the moment, let us know. Okie dokie. So actually, and that's something else I'd like to know is, let me know if you actually learn jazz standards. Do you learn jazz standards as part of your regular practice? I'd like to know about that, or if there's one that you're working on at the moment. So what I wanted to have a quick chat with you about, just for a couple of minutes, was jazz standards and why they're important to learn. Because the thing is, some people say to me, you know what, Nigel, I hate jazz. It's not my cup of tea. I'm not interested in being an improvising musician. I'm not interested in going and playing in jazz jams. Why would I bother learning standards? It's a good question. I think that it doesn't matter what style of music that you're into, learning jazz standards is a really important thing to do because a number of different reasons. First thing is, jazz standards are, and a jazz standard I'm talking about classic jazz tunes, tunes that that a lot of people know. And amongst the musician community, pretty much all of them know these tunes. So things like I Got Rhythm, or let me see, Night and Day, Girl from Ipanema, the sort of classic jazz tunes that are really familiar. So the first point is that jazz standards are part of the sort of framework of the music language. And particularly as a saxophone player, you're going to bump into a lot of other musicians, hopefully. And one of the common things that we all know is jazz standards. So it's important to know at least the core, really well-known jazz standards. Now, even if you're not interested in improvising them, there's another good reason why you should be looking at jazz standards. And that is that by learning jazz standards in different styles, or different types of jazz tunes, you have the opportunity to really develop your stylistic playing as a saxophone player. And that's really important for us saxophone players. So understanding the difference between something that's a classic swing tune, like, I don't know, Basin Street Blues or something like that, as opposed to something that's a more funky tune, like, I don't know, So What or Maiden Voyage, or something that's you know, a more modern sound versus something that's got an older sound, or a bossa. There's all these different styles, and by going through and learning that core bundle of jazz standards, it gives you the opportunity as a saxophone player to really understand those styles, and that'll really help you with your playing. Now that'll help you whether you're playing jazz standards, or if you're playing in a concert band, or in a marching band, or you know, in the community band. So it's all stuff that comes in handy. So also, I think jazz standards are really nice melodies. So from a melodic point of view, they can be a great challenge. And finally, I think that the other really important point about jazz standards is if you are interested in learning any improvising, which I think is a great part of being a saxophone player. Doesn't matter what style of improvising you're going to learn, whether that's ska playing or blues or pop or jazz, jazz standards are a great gateway to that, because in the process of learning standards, particularly if you're using our jazz performance packs inside Sax School, you're going to learn all the basic chord structures that turn up all the time in music. And in those contexts, you can use that to develop your knowledge of improvising. So it's a great way to structure your improvising learning. So I think it's really, really important. So to keep things easy for you, I've made a list of my 20 jazz standards. So this is every 20 jazz standards that every sax player should know. You can get this list off our blog, and we'll share a link for it a bit later on. But this is a great starting point. I definitely suggest you go over to our blog and print this off and stick it on your music stand. You can go through and check off each of these tunes as you know them. You may already know all these tunes. So I'd love to know, actually, if you do print this off and you do know all those tunes, send me an email, let me know. So I hope that's been helpful to you. Any comments on that, Claire?
Kevin said he really loves improvising, and he likes the idea of adding a bit of flavour to these jazz standards by doing some improvising. So I like that.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Experimental.
Yeah.
And a good question actually from Zoe, who says, what would be a good standard to begin with as a beginner?
Well, that's a really great. Was it Zoe? Was it? Zoe. Great question, Zoe. And it depends, I suppose, on your ability, where you're up to as a player. Inside Sax School, we've got some very easy jazz standards to get started with. Even something like, there's a Miles Davis tune called So What, which is really, really, really simple, or All Blues. There's some tunes, Freddie Freeloader is another good one. And they're really, really simple tunes that only use a handful of notes, actually. So that's easy from a melodic point of view, but it's also easy from a first steps into improvising. So inside the Sax School members area, we've got some, well, you want to check out those jazz performance packs. I think that's a great structured starting point. And you can, you know, also what I like about those things is that you can try them out and see which one you feel comfortable with as a starting point. Cool, great. So I think this is I'm really keen on this point. You know, personally, I've always worked as a jazz musician, and when I was younger, I always wanted to learn about improvising, and I didn't really know how. No one could really teach me how to do it. I didn't have the opportunity to meet the right teachers, I suppose. So I really struggled with that process of learning. And actually, when I went off to study at this conservatorium in Australia, I actually did a classical degree. I was working as a jazz musician, but I studied classically, and then I also studied jazz along the way. So jazz has been a long sort of learning process for me. And you know, one of the things I picked up along the way of working in symphony orchestras and playing on shows as well as doing jazz gigs and playing in big bands is how important these jazz standards are. So I would definitely suggest you could shortcut that process for you and get this list and start working through these, whether it's in Sax School or yourself, and it'll really help you out. So, jazz standards. There you go. Have we got some, good to see some people in the chat then, Claire?
Yeah, we've had a couple of people answering the quiz. So
have we got some answers? Have we got the right answer? Not saying. We may or may not have had the right answer.
Yeah, still going.
So just a reminder, if you are wondering what we're talking about, and if you just joined us, there was a Billy Joel tune, Just the Way You Are, and we want to know who was the sax player, who played that classic solo in 1977 on Just the Way You Are. Very famous jazz saxophone player. If you know their name, pop it in the chat. We'd love to see if you know it, and at the end we'll tell you. Okay, cool. So, I had a couple of other good questions this week. We had a couple of questions from last week, didn't we, that carried over?
Yeah,
that
I picked a few up from this.
That I really wanted to get to. So, I thought we might run through a couple of these. Now, I mentioned at the start that I was going to have a talk about breathing. And we had a great question from Cynthia Thomas. If you're here, Cynthia, say hi. You're asking this question. You're saying, Nigel, why do I run out of breaths when I'm playing? Now, it sounds like a really simple question, but it's a really common problem. And particularly if you're relatively new to playing saxophone, it's difficult to manage your air. If you have a problem with that, where you're running out of air when you're playing sax or unsure about what to do with your breathing, let me know in the comment. Give us a yes in the comments and just let me know. It's definitely something that you need to be strategic about. And my top tip to you, Cynthia, and anybody else who's having a problem with this, is to try and think really strategically about your breathing when you're practicing. So let's say you've got a brand new piece of music that you're working through. Right at the start, when you start working through that piece of music, I want you to think about where the natural phrases are, because music is organized like language, it's like sentences, okay? We've got an idea that is in a sentence, and there's a natural pause, and then there's another sentence. So in between those sentences is where you should breathe. Just like when I'm talking to you, I breathe at the end of my sentences. So when you're learning a new piece of music, think about where the end of the musical sentence is, or the phrase, and see if that's an appropriate place to breathe. And then I would put a little tick or a little check mark on your music so that you are always going to breathe in that same place when you're practicing. So if you go through that process of marking out where you're supposed to breathe, then that's going to make it easier. And it's also going to remind you as you're playing through the piece where you should be breathing. And then apart from that, I think the other important side of it is thinking about physiologically, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
That's it.
Physiologically, what you're doing with your body anyway, right, when you're breathing. So it's super important when we're playing. Obviously you want to have a good posture, you want to have a straight back, and whether you're sitting or standing, but you need to be thinking about breathing really deeply. So I always think about breathing right down to the bottom, visualizing it. I mean, regardless of what's actually happening inside your body, you're thinking about breathing, pulling the air right down and deep into the bottom of your lungs, and then pushing the air out from here when you're playing. So I'm always trying to fill my lungs up and then get all that air out. And sometimes, if you're playing something really quiet and it's really slow, you can reach a point where you need to breathe, but you've still got lots of air left inside your lungs, and that can be difficult too, where you need to breathe out before you breathe in. So that all comes back to being strategic about planning out your breathing. So I hope that helps you, Cynthia, and anybody else too. If that makes sense, let me know. Give us a yes in the comments, because I think it's something that's really important for us all to think about. So that was a good question. Have you had any other questions that have come in, by the way?
No, not so far, no.
Well, keep those questions coming in if you've got any questions.
Sorry, somebody mentioned that long tones help with the breathing.
Yeah.
Just doing those long tone exercises.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, long tone exercises are great. And you know, those breathing, thinking strategically about your breathing, that's something you can do in your scales as well. It's something you can do in your technique practice. So whenever you're practicing, you should always be thinking about your breathing. And eventually, it will become a sort of habit thing, and you won't need to think about it so hard. I was doing some practice this morning on a classical etude, and I found myself having to go through and mark the breathing in. Same thing. You know, I've been playing for 30 years. I'm still going in and marking the breathing, because I was thinking, well, yeah, that didn't feel comfortable over that phrase. If I breathe here instead, it could make the phrase flow more smoothly. So it's an important thing to think about. Okay, so another good question we had. Oh, this is a quick question. Actually, I didn't write down who this was from, but they were asking, should you keep your sax out on a stand or away in a case? And we kind of covered on this this last week, actually, in Live 9. We were talking about your room setup. And I think it really depends on the situation you have at home. So if you've got a dog running around, lots of kids, and you're practicing in an area where everyone's walking through, leaving a saxophone on the stand is probably not the best idea, because it's probably going to get knocked over at some point, and that's probably going to mean you have to go to the saxophone repairer. So I wouldn't suggest that. But in my room, like you can see my Barry's on the stand there, and my other altos on the stand. I keep my saxophones on the stand all the time, because this is my studio, and only I come in here, and the instruments are safe on the stand. So it's really up to you. It's not going to hurt the instrument as long as it's not getting knocked over. Now, I had a quick question about mouthpieces. This is a question from Ohad, and he was asking, can you recommend a mouthpiece for rock music? For rock music. I was thinking about this today, and it's a good question. Anyone else out there play rock music? If they got a suggestion for a rock sax mouthpiece, let us know in the chat. I'd like to know. So mouthpieces are a tricky topic because there's so many variables. So I thought I'd give you a super quick overview. In fact, I'll tell you what I could do. I'll give you a little bit of a demo of something. So this is my mouthpiece that I use now, which is a Theo 1A slant sig hard rubber mouthpiece. It's a size 8. It's a nice big open chamber mouthpiece, and it's got a lovely dark sound. And I'm constantly recording in this studio room, so I don't need to have lots of projection. I like to have a mouthpiece that's really versatile, and this lets me do that. Whereas, as an example, for a more of a rock type sound, typically people would use a metal mouthpiece. So here's a metal mouthpiece that I've got that I think is a great rock mouthpiece. So this is a Theo 1A Durga, size 8, hard rubber mouthpiece, metal mouthpiece rather. I think it's a Durga 2. This is an awesome mouthpiece, very powerful, very loud. So the difference between these two, and it isn't just because it's metal and this one's hard rubber, it's got to do with the shape internally. This is much more loud, it's more projection, it's got a brighter sound. And if I look inside it, it's a bit hard for you to see because I've got the reed on at the moment, but it's got a baffle in there. So that's like a little ledge in the inside of the mouthpiece. I think you were asking about that as well, Ohad, what the baffle was. So the easiest way to demonstrate, and maybe you can hear this on the live stream, but I'm going to play a solo and we can compare the two sounds. So this is the hard rubber sound, first of all, doing a sort of rocky, poppy sort of thing. So have a listen to the quality of the sound and see how it compares. So the hard rubber mouthpiece. So it's still pretty loud, and I can get a big sound out of it, but it's got a darkness to it. So let's try the same thing, but with the Durga. So have a listen to this, and I don't play this mouthpiece as much, so it's probably going to be a bit more hard work for me. but let's see if you can hear the difference. In fact, let me know in the comments what you think sounds different about it. Claire's already hiding underneath the chair. What do you think? What do you think's the difference between those two mouthpieces? The metal with a high baffle mouthpiece and the hard rubber. If you could hear that the hard rubber was a darker sound and the metal was a brighter sound, Claire still can't hear anything. She's still got her fingers stuck in her ears over here.
I'm not going to hear anything tomorrow.
Then you'd be right, because that's definitely what's happening. So this would generally be a better choice for a rock sort of gig where you need to cut through and your sound needs to be on top of the guitars and the drums and the bass and all the other stuff, because it's going to give you a lot more projection. The thing that makes it do that is it's got this high baffle inside, like a raised ledge inside the opening here in the mouthpiece. Whereas this one's darker, better for playing in a big band or in a little jazz club or in a recording studio. It gives you a much friendlier, sort of warmer sound. So I hope that's helped you out. Now, I'm not saying you should go and get a Theo 1A Durga, although I think it's an awesome mouthpiece. But if you're looking for something that's for a rock setting, then it's a good idea to have a look at something that's got that baffle in it that's going to give you that more projection. Does that make sense? Let me know if that makes sense to you, and what sort of mouthpiece you're using too. I'd like to know.
So Wayne thought that the metal mouthpiece had more bite to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was his comment. A couple of other suggestions. Didier suggested an Otto Link, and Terry Fry said a slant sig as well. So,
yeah. See, the slant sig is great. The slant sig's what I'm using, and the Otto Link is a good point actually. The Otto Link, well, it's a classic Super Tone Master. Getting very geeky here, but the Super Tone Master Otto Link metal mouthpiece, which is a very popular one, and I've got one of those in my mouthpiece box over there somewhere. Now that is a metal mouthpiece, but it doesn't have this sort of bite, because if you look inside here, it doesn't have the baffle, and it's the baffle that does the magic with the sound. So if you have a look in here, we'll see if we can have a look. Okay, so if you can see in there, can you see that little ledge that's happening in here? It's that ledge here that's making the difference. If you look in this way, you can see, oops, it's really hard to do that, isn't it? As you can see in there, there's a ledge in there. Anyway, so the Super Tone Master Otto Link does not have that, so although it's a metal mouthpiece, it's going to give you a dark sound. Now, one last point, I don't want to rabbit on about this too long, but you can get hard rubber mouthpieces that have a baffle in it that is going to give you that projection, that bright sound. Van Doren make one called a Jumbo Java, and that's a really bright, loud mouthpiece, but it's made of hard rubber. So hopefully that's been useful to you. Have we got any other quick questions we need to cover?
No, just people just jumping in with different suggestions for mouthpieces. Michael Brecker, Fat Boy.
Oh, that's a good mouthpiece. Yeah.
William suggested that one.
Yeah, that's a good mouthpiece, and again, it's got a big baffle in it. Hey, one other thing before we wrap up is someone asked me last week to tell you about my saxophones that I've got in here, and I thought it was a good idea to just quickly let you know, because a lot of people ask me about this. So that tenor that I'm playing is a Dave Guardala tenor saxophone, and actually I don't think you can get them anymore. I actually bought this in Los Angeles, I don't know, in about 28 years ago or something, long time ago. Early 90s I bought it, and it's a really great solid tenor. It's quite a heavy tenor, but I like it because it's very robust and it's got a nice dark sound, so it suits me, and I don't really change my saxophones very often. So that's a Dave Guardala tenor. My alto, I've had this for even longer, 30 something years, which is a Yamaha YAS 62 classic purple logo Yamaha, and they've done a reissue of these now. Good solid horn. I've had this since new as well. Been around the world many times. So that's my alto that I use all the time. And my soprano, which is a new addition actually, is a Yamaha Custom Z soprano. And I like this because it's a one-piece body. It doesn't have the neck. A lot of them have the movable neck. I like the one-piece body. It seems to suit me better. So that's my soprano, a Yamaha Custom Z soprano. And my Barry sax is a Selma Mark 6. So I really like this too. I haven't had that so long, about 10 years or so, but it's a good, solid, workhorse type Barry sax, which I like getting out every now and then. Okay, so now before we wrap up, I don't want to take too much of your time. It's great having you here tonight, but I wanted to answer the quiz. So Claire, we had a couple of people who answered.
We did. We had Julian, we had Stephen, and we had Greg, who all said...
The answer to the quiz tonight was, who was a saxophone player with Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are? And it was Phil Woods. So, Phil Woods. So, we had a few people got that answer.
We did. Somebody pointed out that they said that it was a bit of a giveaway because they could see that he had a hat on and he was known for his wearing a hat, wasn't he?
Oh, now come on. So, jazz saxophone players with a hat on? Yeah. I mean, that is pretty typically Phil Woods. He does look like that quite a lot. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. I should have picked a more obscure picture, you know. Anywho, well done you guys.
You have to give him a clue. It's a clue.
Yeah, that's right. See, I told you, Claire, there's some clever people on these Sax School Lives. That's awesome. So Phil Woods, and actually Phil Woods is a real legend, not in the pop world, but in the jazz world. I'll definitely suggest that you, if you've not done so, go and check him out. Check out some of his albums, because Phil Woods is an amazing player. He's got a lovely sound and an iconic player that's influenced so many people. He was kind of like the new Charlie Parker. And in fact, he was married to Charlie Parker's wife. Yeah, yeah. So there you go. So Phil Woods, so check that out. And also, if you'd like to learn that solo from Just the Way You Are, I've done a series of lessons on that inside Sax School as well. So, well, thanks a bunch for sticking with us this week and joining in our conversation. If you want to get this list of the 20 classic jazz standards that every saxophone player should know, you can go to our blog, and we'll put a link in the notes for this live stream. So if you go to our blog and look at the episode for Live 10, the blog post for episode 10, there's a download link. You don't have to put your email in or anything. You just click the link and it'll download to your machine, and you've got this and you can print it out, stick it on your music stand. So go and check that out, and then check out these standards and see how many of them you know, or use this as a starting point. And maybe a good challenge for you this week would be to choose one of these standards and start learning. And if you'd like to find out more about how to learn those jazz standards, then grab the 30-day trial of Sax School if you're not a member, and check out our jazz performance packs, because they're a brilliant way to structure learning. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great week. Whatever you're doing, practice hard, and we'll say goodbye, and hopefully we'll see you next week. So keep practicing hard, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.